We're very excited to present this documentary in progress. It's called Clouds, and it's a portrait of a unique community of artists who use code as a medium for visual expression. People often ask us, what does this work look like? Here's a glimpse.
So these artists write algorithms that draw from nature and natural systems to create beautiful images. In a traditional sense, they create installations and work that responds to viewers' input being completed by the presence of people, often beautiful forms and images that move and respond to people.
And as artists, in the contemporary sense, they respond to their cultural context of ubiquitous cameras, smart sensors, ever-expanding networks and social media, and comment on how these emerging technologies impact our everyday lives.
So this image is a screenshot from GitHub where they collaborate. They defy the traditional notion of an artist who works in isolation, and out of necessity work in highly collaborative, networked culture, sharing their code and ideas open source. It's in order to work at a high visual level and critical level with emerging technology.
This is their world. This is our world. We were compelled to tell the story in a way that would honor and reflect the philosophy and structure of this community of hacker artists who are the first generation who really kind of embraced the sharing of tools in an open source way. And so the shape of our documentary is not a linear narrative, as demonstrated here by author Kurt Vonnegut, who's artfully tracing out kind of your standard plot diagram. But instead, it resembles a network, an interconnected web of ideas, a continually unfolding conversation with many narrative threads running through it, but doesn't have a definitive beginning, middle, and end.
This is our cast. There's 32 artists, critics, and thinkers that work at the cutting edge of technology. And this community has a really deep history, but it's an important moment right now as all of us start to spend more time interacting with social networks and software-based systems. Their work is having a growing relevance, really.
In fact, many of these people, while so highly connected through the internet, rarely actually have the opportunity to meet in person, except for events like this, as people have been talking about hackathons today. And we actually met at one such hackathon at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh at the Studio for Creative Inquiry, where the most pioneering visual artists in this field kind of downloaded themselves from the internet and gathered around a table for a high-intensive, energy week of creativity. And as many of you, if you've participated in hackathons, have witnessed, when you actually have people in the same physical space for a focused period of time, the kind of invention that can come out of it is extraordinary. So this was in 2011. It was at the height of a craze around this new gestural video game controller called the Kinect.
The Kinect was made by Microsoft, or a video game controller, but quickly after its release, the code libraries to work with it, if you're a do-it-yourself enthusiast, became available. So people started programming things and experimenting with this device. The creative coding community, the one that we're documenting, began to explore the aesthetic and expressive potential of this device. They started using it to make artwork. Myself being involved in that community, I wanted to experiment with this device as a way to make movies as a cinematic medium.
Yeah, so we both have backgrounds in film, video, and creative coding. And so it was logical for us that we kind of wanted to break open this device and see the images that were coming out of it rather than using it for this kind of gestural interaction. So James is a creative coder, contributor to the Open Frameworks community. He has an expertise in computational photography applied to experimental video art, and had been working on these photographs using 3D scanners and depth sensors such as the Kinect with his collaborator Alexander Porter. So when we met at the Art and Code conference, that was kind of the context. It was about furthering this research into using this technology for new kinds of cinematic visualization.
And so I met Jonathan at the conference, and his background is in anthropology and new media, but he's really become a documentarian working to explore the frontiers of art and technology. So he had come to the conference to interview all the residents and create an archive of what we were working on. I was there with this experimental camera rig, and we thought, sort of started this modest experiment. What if we, instead of using this device to interact with the computer, used it as a lens to look at the world in a new way?
So can we turn that lens onto the community that made the device and the technology available as a way of telling their story? What would happen if we put these software artists in front of a 3D scanner and interviewed them? Clouds was the result of that, and though we didn't know at the time, that experiment was the beginning of this long-term investigation in 3D cinematography and applying generative art techniques to storytelling.
I think data as narrative is something that's really interesting, and the idea that you know, when I talk a lot about the fact that our lives can be documented through data, and they are being documented through data.
I just think it's so much fun to build projects that people can bring their own stories to and their own perspective.
So a little bit about how this works. We use custom software, which is designed in open frameworks, to visualize this data and interact with it with virtual cameras. So it's recorded from one perspective, but we're moving these cameras around it in a 3D space, which is very much like a video game. And from a filmmaking perspective, this is kind of an entirely new process and offers a lot of potential and suggests one possible future direction for cinematography. In documentaries, there's this mainstay of the talking head interview, which can get kind of tiresome to look at. And so we were really intrigued by the dynamism of this footage, bringing like a new dimension to the way we can represent the human form on screen.
This software came out of our collaboration, Jonathan and I working together on Clouds. But we, in the spirit of the community that we're documenting, we released it open source. And we've been doing workshops, for instance, this one that was held last month at iBeam, just up the street, where we invite filmmakers and artists and coders from the local community to begin experimenting along with us with this new technique. So we've released a website that you can download the software and try it out yourself. There's no coding knowledge really required. And we've also began to track the community that's emerging and collect the videos that they're producing on the website.
So it's often remarked that Clouds is a film about new media artists, which is itself a new media artwork.
And to understand that better, we interviewed many curators and critics in addition to the artists to help bring context to the work. So for instance, we have science fiction author Bruce Sterling discussing his views on computation.
Okay, you can't really do a lot of simulation with a fountain pen, kinda, You draw somebody's picture, but it doesn't do anything, it doesn't actually behave in the way that another system behaves. So, I mean, the beauty of code, at the lowest level is like a bunch of blips moving around on a little racetrack. It's just ones and zeros moving through a processor. And processors are really beautiful, intricate objects. They're too small for the human eye to see, but they're gorgeous. I mean, they're like urbanscapes, And these and the sort of ones and zeros. I mean, the idea that these things are passing through these endless numbers of gates. There's something profound about that. Just this kind of elemental activity on the level of the metal surface.
So visuals like this are created through code. And one of the most exciting things about how we're producing Clouds is that we've commissioned many of the artists in the film to actually give us their code to make new work that will play along in the documentary to illustrate the major themes of the conversation.
So we found a way to create a system that weaves stories together. And we call this a story engine. The way it works is that we've meticulously tagged about 30 hours of footage, assembling thousands of clips into a vastly connected cloud of data, of nodes representing themes in the conversation. And as a viewer, you'll be able to surf through this network, following a kind of train of thought from one idea to the next, never seeing the same sequence twice. So we think of this as sort of an interactive archive. It's a virtual exhibition of the artist's work, kind of like a conference also, and what we call an infinite conversation.
So this visual right here is a representation of your view through through the story network. So each node, each circle is a clip. You watch that for a few seconds, 5 or 10 seconds, and it'll go on to the next one based on something of a related theme, but described by a different person. And this way, because it's dynamic, we can offer a level of interactivity, so you can choose to go a different direction or choose a different theme to follow your interests, and the film will never be the same each time you watch it. So what we're working on, and in the space we're working, we're seeing a convergence of mediums. So we see at one time video games becoming more cinematic, bringing story into that platform, where at the same time we're finding that film is being consumed more and more readily on computers. So we're making a project, Clouds, that's exactly at that intersection, basically.
And throughout the history of storytelling, the way we tell stories adapts to every successive medium. And I think that we believe strongly that filmmaking will endure. We love films, and we want to see that kind of filmmaking stick around because every medium has something essential which can't be simulated in new formats. But at the same time, contemporary storytellers and artists can't help but kind of experiment with these media for telling stories in new ways.
So this final visual is the entire conversation network mapped out into all the different themes.
So as we find ourselves connected with more people than ever before and able to visualize those connections on screens and in the browser, we can kind of humbly appreciate the complexity of it all. We can understand ourselves in a larger context, and we can see the ways that our lives are linked through the networks around us. So the nature of the stories we tell necessarily reflects this shift in perspective.
So thank you.
Thanks.